Jansen's opinions about the elites in a repressive system are as comprehensive as they are scathing. Opinions that he clearly expresses in his entire oeuvre. The American myth needs to be re-examined in the 21st century, even rewritten. One of the most important contributions in this regard is being produced by the American artist Marcus Jansen. With Caribbean roots educated in Germany, the native New Yorker is a painter through and through. A painting diagnostician with a gaze as comprehensive as it is incisive. He radically disposes of the early American myth of undeviating progress. His results are disconcerting, and they can be frightening, whereas in the 1830s, the founder of a genuinely American landscape painting, Thomas Cole, pictured the course of empire free from its savage beginnings to its ultimate decline against a backdrop of classical facades and rows of columns under the influence of a famous book by the historian Edward Gibbon. In Jansen's work, destruction has come to cast iron architecture and wooden beach shacks, organically curved structures or a skewed Disneyland, or to a large loft with missing walls, while the occupant broods over his forced evacuation, titled Foreclosure. That picture was painted in 2008, at the height of the real estate bubble. Jansen's America finds itself in dire shape, at the mercy of more than just natural forces. Yet it is not only the endangerment and decline of an architectural urban universe that troubles Jansen. His expansive grassy landscapes can also be seen as direct responses to the endless prairies of the Midwest that inspired Church and Bierstadt. Secret Gardens, 2011 extends across the entire horizontal format. There are two hedge-like horizontal barriers at the upper edge of the swamp-like foreground, in smears of a blackish green. Two toadstools as tall as trees flank a derelict shack. Farther back a third lies on the ground as though having been chopped down. Continuous black wall blocks off the horizon near the top edge. Part of it has collapsed in the center, exposing the silhouette of a chaotic building site. The apparent idyll of Secret Gardens is ominously contaminated the poisonous toadstools, and on the verge of environmental catastrophe, nevertheless, a few people, extremely small and distant, are busily going about their puzzling activities on the grass. Golfers? Gardeners? A climber? To all appearances, the chalky green also radiates disaster, hermetically sealed off and exhibiting an artificial calm as if nothing has happened, or ever could. This expansive view clearly has a very different meaning than the settled landscapes of the Hudson River tradition, though it shares with them the use of tiny figures to enhance the impression of vast distances. The same landscape appears in the painting Monocultural Farms, 2010, parceled out by barriers similar to those of Secret Gardens, but with two grazing sheep. Both animals are marked with small targets. The same symbol appears on the stable, which is marked private. It identifies the sheep as animals meant for slaughter, and it appears repeatedly in this context. A pig with the head of a rabbit, wearing a neckerchief, and an albino pig beneath a cloud of sooty smoke. In every respect, a total reversal of the Garden of Eden as dreamed of by the Hudson River School. Artificial rain falling on dunes from colorful pink-edged clouds in a black sky is equally contrary to the laws of nature. Whether nature will respond with tornadoes, blizzards, and disastrous floods to an extent never seen before only science can decide. In any case, storm damage is a recurring misfortune in Jansen's work. For example, he depicts a building, a weather monitoring station. Of all things, meant to issue storm warnings, in tatters, and with a missing roof, the employee attempting to prop it up with a much too slender pole perfectly symbolizes man's helplessness. The fact that the current American president considers global warming and melting polar ice to be inventions of the Chinese only doubly confirms Jansen's warnings. Other works emphasize even more pointedly the contrast with the untouched landscapes of the pioneer era. In 1826, Thomas Cole painted Waterfalls in the Catskills, emphasizing their overwhelming size by the inclusion of a tiny distant Indian. Waterfalls were a popular elemental motif in early American landscape art, so it is unsurprising that Jansen updates this motif as well, picturing its most recent dismal state. Impeach each 2008 shows a dam that has burst, producing a waterfall. The raging torrent brings with it used tires, symbols here, as in many other paintings, of a polluted environment and the unresolved removal of waste. On the base of the concrete wall, a graffiti artist, now running away, has just left his call for impeachment. As the spray can and the work's title assure us, we are all guilty. But for families on outings, even real waterfalls have lost the frisson, the sublime. They are only good for recreational purposes, and are given just a brief glance by the children, even if it were conceivable to return, with great effort, this America of exploited landscapes, hybrid animals, artificial rain clouds, and broken dams to the untouched spaces of the 19th century. There is no way back from the collapsed wooden shacks and dilapidated walls, severed power poles, and hidden antennas. Not even to the trash-filled backyards of the Ashcan School, and certainly not to the visions of the technology-mad painters around Frank Stella. Even motifs actually in harmony with the optimistic American dream now lie in ruins. In Playground 2009 and Disneyland 2006, all that remain are abandoned. Structures and empty cars up on blocks. Tangled slides, severed wires, and dead antennas doze, stripped of their function. A solitary mother and her child stand lost in the midst of the wreckage. Are the Disneyland visitors running away from the debacle? It would seem that if the artist holds any hope at all, it is. With children, is this why he so decisively turns against the playful anticipation and simulation of war even in childhood? One of his most revelatory depictions is Resistance and War Games 2015. It reveals a bombed-out, bullet-ridden cityscape, a ghastly rubble field of destroyed apartment buildings, gaping window openings, and heavily damaged lines of streets with their buried infrastructure exposed. Bomb craters and torn-up paving cover the ground with a network of destruction, and the building on the far right exhibits the shadow of monstrous contamination. Recognizably collaged sections lend the sharpness of cutouts to the destruction. A scenario between chiseled simulation and anticipation of the gruesome reality of Aleppo. The events and figures in the painting don't match, but belong to different levels of reality. Child's toy recalls the heavy machine used to remove blocks of stone. Above the twisted water pipe sits a sort of lead soldier, part of the game. To the left are the grandmother, mother, and child trio from Picasso's painting Massacre in Korea 1951, an explicit quote representing another secondary reality that draws parallels to occurrences of massacres. Next to the left edge, an outsized graffito, a cat wearing a pink ribbon, crouches, twice the height of the figures. Around its head curls a text balloon about the relationship between power and powerlessness, appealing street art and message in one. On the right side, next to the irradiated building, a little girl holds a balloon with white polka dots. The only creature that is not a part of the deadly game, but makes her own way through the rubble. All in all, a tableau of the devastation of war in a future possible at any time. evoked with the artificial unscrupulousness of a computer game. America between playful preparation and self-fulfilling prophecy. How far it has already come is suggested by the phalanx of heavily armed warriors with skull-like gas masks and full-body shields moving like a wall against a lone protesting woman in Code Pink 2008. Her white sock, like several balloons in the sky, carries the peace symbol. The sign held up high shouts no, a kind of pink parasol towers above the heads of the fierce attackers, and even on the shields there are shimmering pink reflections. Is this bellicose march directed against peaceful anti-war protesters who resist with a delicate pink out of the can precisely in the center of the painting? Is the power of nonviolence having its effect? Can the visionary and doomsayer Jansen occasionally invent a world in which things go right? Painting is the most intimate form of waging war, he says in an interview. One might add that also extends to the ruin that gives rise to wars and the ruin they leave behind. The art historian Brooklyn McGowan emphasizes in Jansen's painting his artistic examination of what the World War general, and later American President Dwight D. Eisenhower, described as the military-industrial complex. Eisenhower foresaw the fatal collaboration between the powerful armed forces and the armaments industry. In almost every decade since then, for whatever reason, a powerful America has been engaged in warfare. In 1990, Jansen, then a career soldier, was sent to the war in Iraq. In 1997, having become increasingly disillusioned, he left the military. In that same year, as a trained commercial artist, he began his artistic career in Aachen. To this day, his paintings profit from that early training. Enamels and spray paints continue to be just as important as bits of collage and oil pastels. In The Apprentice 2009, a young painter stands as though transfixed in front of the wild, uncontrolled tumult of overlapping colored strokes that seem to be fighting each other on a giant canvas. One thick streak of pigment escapes the format and pours out into the atelier. The painter is much like Goethe's sorcerer's apprentice, incapable of quelling the forces he has evoked. Chunks of earth are sent flying, pipes are severed, people and poultry race away in all directions. The only figure holding still is Dorothy, carrying the sunflower. No less important are the order and disorder of his paintings in general, his compositional style. Jansen tends to employ expansive horizontal formats, though not exclusively, for cityscapes, interiors, or their interpenetration. Again and again, we gaze at a projecting picture window. It is reminiscent of a stage, not the traditional peep show, but an expansive cityscape or landscape. A deliberately vague, broad stripe in the foreground serves as a veritable proscenium before the middle ground and an obstructed back wall. The foreground, a blurred no man's land, does not block obstacles but pushes them aside. Our gaze passes unhindered across the empty apron of the stage. The entrance to the picture becomes a flyover. It is only in the middle distance that we encounter people and objects. Only here is the space logically organized by perspective, becoming the scene of the action. One critic 9 has rightly called this a trap that opens up to our perception and then snaps shut again. The futurists claim that they place the viewer in the center of their paintings, and even though Jansen has nothing in common with those early modern Italian avant-gardists, their boast applies to his work as well. This feeling of being sucked into the painting contributes greatly to the distinct sense of space in his lofts, attics, and receding streets. It enhances the formidable presence of even the tiniest figures seen from the back, which also help to draw us into the depth. At the same time, he situates the seemingly scattered symbolic vocabulary. If Brooklyn McGowan's assertion that only innocence has a face is correct, Then these portraits touch on the central concept in Jansen's visual politics. Francis Bacon is not far removed, to be sure. But in place of his tortured bodies, the American painter presents us with dignified costume dolls and characteristic poses from the world of finance and the military hierarchy. At first, there were Wall Street bankers dressed in business suits and ties, representing criminal money hunger beneath their deformed round heads. They were soon joined by military figures in uniforms bristling with medals. The contribution of research and science was then exhibited in the Illuminator 1 2015, whose head is replaced by a light bulb, and the Faceless Professor, also 2015, whose convoluted thought processes have burst through his skull and taken possession of his head like an octopus. The result of this explosion of brain power can be read at the side. 5 + 5 = 11. Jansen's opinions about the elites in a repressive system are as comprehensive as they are scathing, opinions that he clearly expresses in his entire oeuvre.